My name is Kirk Dunn, and this is the Knitting Pilgrim Talks. I'm an actor, writer, and knitter, and I'm also known as the Knitting Pilgrim. I earned that title because in 2003, I was awarded an Ontario Arts Council Chalmers grant to knit Stitched Glass, an installation of 3 large panels designed in the style of stained glass windows, which look at the commonalities and the conflicts between the 3 Abrahamic faiths, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. They took me 15 years to knit. And when the project was complete, my wife Claire and I wrote a play called The Knitting Pilgrim about my experience knitting stitched glass and my research into interfaith relations. One thing that wasn't covered in the play was the meaning behind the imagery in the knitted panels. So, this series explores each section in conversation because, ultimately, the project is about having conversations with empathy and curiosity about how we understand and sometimes misunderstand each other. Welcome to the Knitting Pilgrim Talks. Today, we'll be looking at a section of the Judaic window, and it is inside the Star of David in the top right point of the star. And as a reminder, all the images inside the star are positive images of the faith, with the ones outside the star being the more challenging topics and reflecting questions that I have with respect to the faith. So this one is definitely inside the star, and you can see in that top right point, you can see 3 images of the one of the menorah, the shofar, and the lulav, and these are all a reference to holidays or holy days. I'm hoping that these iconic symbols are able to remind us of the heightened awareness that holidays bring. And to talk about this section today, I'm very happy to welcome the Rabbi David Seed. Originally from New London, Connecticut, Rabbi Seed didn't actually grow up in a religious or observant family, but many formative experiences, including some were spent at the Jewish summer camp, Camp Rama, along with a trip to the former Soviet Union and the Eastern Europe, convinced him to make Judaism an integral part of his life. And he attended a combined program of the Jewish Theological Seminary and Columbia University in New York City, where he graduated with degrees in history and political science. And then he returned to the seminary for rabbinical school, where he was ordained in 1983. And at the same time, he studied at the School of Social Work at Columbia, where he received his master's of social work in 1984. And in addition to being a rabbi at Adath Israel in Toronto, he has in the past served as president of the Ontario region of the Rabbinical Assembly, of the Organization of Conservative Rabbis. And he is currently the vice president of the Toronto Board of Rabbis, as well as the chair.
President.
Oh,
I'm now
you're the president now. Excellent.
For a few more days.
Okay. President of the Toronto Board of Rabbis, and he's also the chair of the Christian-Jewish Dialogue of Toronto. Past chair. There we go. Okay. And now you might wonder what would inspire someone to be so active, not only in his own community, but also in society at large. And in Rabbi David's case, it's a devotion to social justice, a commitment to interfaith understanding and relationships, and being the embodiment of the attribute of chesed, or loving kindness. Rabbi David, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for giving me the privilege of talking with you today, particularly about such beautiful works that you have created. They are extraordinary.
That is very kind. Thank you so much.
And I look forward to seeing them at some point in person.
Yes, your lips to God's ears. We're hoping to get them out and so we can perform the Knitting Pilgrim sometime in the future. But you know, this COVID thing has put a bit of a damper in all of our plans recently. So there you go. So I'm wondering if you can tell us about the holidays. I mean, one of the things that I and I think a lot of members of our particularly secular society, even myself, I call myself a Christian. I forget that the root of the word holiday is holy day, and so I'm wondering if you can just talk about how important these days are to Judaism and what their impact is.
They are integral to Judaism and to Jewish life. I believe the intent is to mark time as being significant, particularly at certain times of the year, that we can't just go on day after day after day. We have to set aside certain moments in time. And that's what it means, as you correctly said, a holy day. And what does holy mean? I think that gets to the issue at hand. So, for example, the book that we consider to be holy, regardless of the faith, we have holy books, we have holy aspects of our lives, we have holy days. And this idea of holiness is that this book or this time or these words are different. They're set aside. They're not like the other days of the week. We are setting aside this day as being different from others. So, for example, the Sabbath, Shabbat, that as we read in the book of Genesis, that God created the world and that there were 6 days during which the world and the various aspects of it were created. And on that 7th day, God rested. And we do so in commemoration of God having rested. That we can't, and I think that this is very appropriate that we're talking about this in the midst of a pandemic, that we can't just go on day after day after day. I don't know whether you've heard, but I certainly hear and have felt that time has a different sense to it now because our markers are not the same as they usually are. Many of us, myself included, are working from home for the most part. We just came out of, a lockdown where many of us were at home, or even if we went out, we can't go into a store, we can't do the same things that we are accustomed to doing. So what Judaism is saying is that we have to mark certain days as being separate, apart, unique, so that we can appreciate what we have been given, particularly the gift of time, that we just don't do it day after day after day, but we pause and we have an opportunity to reflect on the time that we've been given and do of this particular moment, whether it's Shabbat, the Sabbath, or any of the other Jewish holidays, the major holidays, some of the minor holidays, and think back to the meanings that these particular days have.
Right. Now, one of the things that I think is so important about what you're saying is that it's a very intentional activity or event. In modern times, we think of a holiday as, you just go somewhere, you lie around and you relax. Whereas what you're talking about with a holy day is making it sacred and taking that time to be grateful and taking that time to really be intentional and put some effort into it. And I think that I can speak for me when I lose track of that sacredness. I find the holidays are not nearly they're just not very important.
And that's the challenge which we face, particularly now, but also in the society in which we live, particularly with electronics, that we are constantly pulled with everything on every which way, calling for our attention, calling for our time. And we don't take the opportunity to step back. And as you said, and correctly so, the idea of intentionality, of thinking about this day and making of it something that is different, where we can actively reflect on the world in which we live, on the people in that world, and our relationship with the Almighty. We don't have that opportunity. We are so busy during the week that we need to set aside that time to reflect on the sacredness of time and to make of it something unique and special.
Right. And then in addition to the Sabbath, which it is every week, you do have the high holidays in Judaism. And can you just remind us, for those of us who are not familiar with them, what those are and what they entail?
Well, the high holidays, first are Rosh Hashanah, which is the New Year. Understanding that this is the anniversary when the world was created. And just an aside, that this is, in Judaism, an idea of a universal holiday. That this is something we all share, that we live and act in this world, and it's something that we should be cognizant of. So Rosh Hashanah, and then 10 days later is Yom Kippur, which is the Day of Atonement, a day, the most sacred day of the year, a day of fasting and reflecting on our own actions and thinking about what we might do for the year to come.
Right. Yeah, and actually, in both of those holidays, the shofar plays a role. Is that
so?
correct?
The shofar is used throughout Rosh Hashanah. Mm-hmm. It's not blown on Yom Kippur, except at the very, very end.
Yeah, right.
But it is actually one of the names for, there are several, for Rosh Hashanah is called Yom Teruah, the day of the blowing of the shofar, because again it is used throughout. It's a way, and we actually blow the shofar in the month prior to Rosh Hashanah as a way of preparing ourselves, that we can't reflect on the year gone by and how we acted and how we interacted with others unless we really wake ourselves up. And that's, again, one of the ideas of the shofar, is wake ourselves up and think about how we've acted. So we can't just show up in the synagogue and say, God, I'm here, let's go. We really have to think about, how have I acted? What could I have done better? What should I have done differently? So it's a whole idea. And during that month, we blow the shofar every morning, except for Shabbat, to again remind us of the upcoming days of awe.
Right. And you say the shofar is also used to signal the end of Yom Kippur. Is that right?
Yes, to signal the end of Yom Kippur. That this period of time is called the Aseret Yemei Teshuvah, the 10 days of repentance, beginning with Rosh Hashanah and concluding with Yom Kippur, so that it's a time for us to have a heightened sense of how we have acted, and how we would like to act for the year to come, to think about what we might be able to do better from the past.
Right. Yeah. It's like, again, very, very intentional, very introspective and focused,
Yeah,
for sure.
and very intense.
Yeah. Right. Right. One of the other, so the shofar is one of the images that I've included in the in the tapestry there. I've also got there a lulav. Can you tell us about the lulav and the festival it's
Sure.
associated with?
So the lulav is an integral part of the holiday of Sukkot, which is the harvest festival that we have in the fall. It begins just a few days the uh, after the holiest day of Yom Kippur is Sukkot. It's an important day. Obviously, all of the holidays are important, but each one tries to remind us of a different aspect of the world in which we live and the significance of the world. So, for example, as you mentioned, for Sukkot, it's the idea that we are harvesting the grains and the other crops that we have taken care of during the previous months. And now that we have, and praying that it was a good harvest, that we come to thank God for all that we now are able to enjoy, that we have literally food on the table for the end of the fall and for the cold and the dark winter that will soon be upon us. So again, I like that word intentionality that you spoke about, is that we just, and we're far removed from it, not being agricultural people in our day, but it brings us back to all of our roots as human beings, that we were all probably farmers at some point, um, and that we couldn't go to the grocery store and say, oh, I want this or I want that, and being able to take advantage of the fact that we can buy almost anything we want, regardless of the season of the year.
True.
Because
Yeah.
if it's, so we might pay a little bit more, for strawberries that are out of season, but if we really want them, we can get them. Um, but life is not like that. We have to appreciate the blessings that we have been given. And the lulav is a series of um, different objects. So one is the palm, the myrtle, the willow, and then the etrog or the citron. And we hold these four species together, and it reminds us about the harvest and shaking them around as we do throughout the holiday, again, except for the Sabbath. It reminds us of these blessings that we've had, of the crops and the fruits and the grains, for which we take for granted. So again, it's a reminder that we should not um, think that we can always go to the store and pick out what we want. But even if we can, it's a reminder that there are people in this world who are still hungry and who need to be helped so that they do not go without food. So it's a matter of making us more cognizant of something for which we take all too often for granted.
Right. Excellent. Great. The other image I included in this section is the menorah. I'm wondering if you can tell us about where that came from and how it originated.
Sure. So the menorah, or this candelabra, it's actually talked about in the Torah, and this was an important ritual object that was used in the temple in ancient times. It was a 7-branched candelabra that was constantly lit. It was a sign of God's presence, that God is being light, and that God's presence was always there amongst the people. The story of Hanukkah is probably one that is fairly well known to people nowadays. The idea of the Jews having to deal with the Syrian Greeks who did not allow them to worship God as they would have wanted to, and being forced to not be able to honor the Jewish traditions, being forced to worship idols. So after this interaction between the Syrian Greeks and the Maccabees were victorious. They were able to reclaim the temple in Jerusalem. They found 1 flask of oil, and as the story goes, the flask of oil, which should have been able to last for just 1 day, lasted for 8. And the menorah, which again in the temple was a 7-branch candelabra, was now thought of in this way for Hanukkah as an 8-branched. So again, originally the menorah is a 7-branch, but we actually call it a Chanukiah, or a Hanukkah menorah, because this one is 8-branch because of the 8 days of candles, of lights, which were lit during that period of time, and we recognize that. So just as I mentioned before with Sukkot, it's the idea of thinking about the blessings of food and not taking food for granted. The high holiday, not the high holiday, but the holiday, and it's really a minor holiday in a sense, of Hanukkah, reminds us of the idea of freedom, that we should not take freedom for granted, whoever we are, wherever we happen to be, that we have to make sure that we hold fast to our freedoms and ensure that for us, but for all human beings, that we are allowed to be free, because we see what can happen, unfortunately, when we are not free.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. That, and so thank you for that, Rabbi David. You're giving us a great reminder about the power of holy days and what makes them valuable and significant, and what helps them help us. That idea of recharging and recreating and remembering and honoring is all in there. That's
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you so much, Rabbi David. It was a pleasure having you with us today.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
If you would like to get in contact with Rabbi Seed, you can reach him at the website of Adath Israel. That's adathisrael.com. Or you can connect with him via his email, rabbiseed@adathisrael.com. This has been an episode of the Knitting Pilgrim Talks. We'd like to thank the Ontario Arts Council for their support of this conversation series and their funding of Stitched Glass, and the Toronto Arts Council and the Canada Council for the Arts for their support of the Knitting Pilgrim Show. If you'd like to hear more conversations like this about interfaith matters, stitched glass, and knitting, please check out our episodes at kirkdunn.com or the Knitting Pilgrim YouTube channel.